I was told to quietly leave that position. And that reminded me once again that I am not fully welcome in that community in the way that I thought I was. And the funny thing is, there was another student. She was also Black, and she was very heavily involved in the Korean community. And she warned me back then, way back then, in first year. She was like, "Hey, by the way, don't try to get too high up in the Korean Students Association. You will not make it there."
Some decisions look great on paper. Others make people look at you twice and ask if you're okay. And it's usually the second kind that changes everything. This is Unpopular Decisions, where we're having conversations about what it really takes to choose authenticity over approval. I'm your host, Jameelah Calhoun. Today's conversation is about choosing passion over permission and what it costs when your interests don't fit the boxes that people expect you to stay in. I'm joined by Kenyah Calhoun, a social media manager who made an unexpected choice to major in Korean in college, driven by her deep love of K-pop and Korean culture. As a Black woman, however, that choice came with real pushback. Today's episode explores what happens when your curiosity crosses cultural lines. Let's get into it. Kenyah, thanks so much for being on. I'm so excited. And for those who have not guessed it yet, based on her name, Kenyah is actually my sister. So that's why this episode is especially really special. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, before we dive into language and culture, can you tell us what is your unpopular decision that you made? And of course, your name.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kenyah, and my unpopular decision is being a K-pop stan as a Black woman in 2008.
Now, the timing of that is important because, 2008, so we have an OG K-pop fan here. And of course, from today's lens, people are probably like, how is that unpopular? Like, everyone loves K-pop. We have K-pop demon hunters. Like, I think it's 3% of the whole music industry in the US now is K-pop, which is crazy growth. So, yeah, it's important to contextualize that. But I guess taking it all the way to some of the inflection moments you were going through, what aspect of your decision felt misunderstood? Like, you not only were a K-pop stan, but this actually became a really big part of your kind of career and your education as well. So can you take us through what felt unpopular and your journey?
Yeah, I think, in the beginning, of course, we go back to 2008, which feels like forever ago. I think, the first part that was misunderstood was just the interest in a culture overseas, a culture overseas in Asia that people did not know about. People didn't know much about Korean culture. This was definitely the time, 2008 was middle school, a time where people did not have an awareness to differentiate also between cultures in Asia. So that was the first aspect of it. I think the other parts, of course, was getting deep into it, becoming a stan, which really is just the word for fan in fandom culture. And there was that part of just like, why would you dedicate any time in your life to, any great amount of time in your life to this hobby? And it is a strong commitment, knowing the group members, their birthdays, things like that. So that was definitely misunderstood. Like, why would you do that? Why would you take it to that next level? Because fandom culture in the U.S. is not the same as fandom culture in K-pop. So I think those were those aspects.
Yeah, well, I'm sure some people in like the Beehive or something are like, oh no, we are super fans too. But I do know it's a whole other level when it comes to K-pop. You alluded to this as well, like it was this kind of cultural interest. So a lot of people do come to think of K-pop and all of this from a music perspective. But of course, Korean culture is such a big part of that. And that's an area that you also dove into. Can you talk about your decision to kind of more particularly push this as part of your education and your social life?
I think, especially in the beginning, I was just K-pop fan. I was focused on music. I discovered K-pop actually through YouTube back when there were related videos, like a real one that wasn't impacted by the algorithm so heavily. And it was completely by accident. I love the music. I had friends, a few friends in high school who liked it as well. I think, going to college and where I went to college was Washington University in St. Louis. There was a very large Korean community, and there was a deeper involvement that I could get into there. And so I think what ultimately led me to pursue it in education, I majored in Korean language and culture, is number one, of course, I started language in college. So that was the start. And my teachers were fantastic. I loved my teachers, and they introduced me to some other classes that were on K pop. And those were in the East Asian Studies uh, segment department of the school. And the more classes I took, the more I loved it. And so it really was something I fell into. It wasn't something that I intentionally went towards, but I think once I took those classes and I enjoyed it, I just kept taking classes I enjoyed. That's how I approached college. To be honest, it was just like I took what I enjoyed, I kept doing it, and then they were like, "Why not major?" And then the rest is history.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a whole other kind of point of decision making as well. Who questioned or judged you the most when you were deciding to major in Korean specifically?
I think there was hesitation and concern for sure about my career prospects from my family and even from friends who were, confused because, of course, I still had friends who were into K-pop, but not into it to the extent that I was. And so there was this like, oh, so you're really into this. You're gonna study it. That's different. And so, definitely the biggest concern, of course, was just career prospect. What are you gonna do with that? And where would you go with it? Are you trying to be a K-pop idol? I'm like, no, not at all. So I think those were the main, concerns that people had. And I had them too. I have to say, it's not like I was just like, oh yeah, everything's gonna be perfect. And but like I said, I was trying to find enjoyment and find belonging. And I loved my teachers and I loved the support I had. So that's why I decided to major, even though it is a very uncommon major.
Yeah, in fact, I was reading up on this. There's only about 18,000 bachelor degrees in foreign languages in general. And then of those, only 3.5% go to Black or African American graduates. So definitely a pretty rare, or you're part of an illustrious group there who ultimately majored in a foreign language. But I guess to that point about culture as well, was there anything that you were kind of taught growing up, explicitly or implicitly, about what a Black girl should be interested in and, the paths that were open to you?
I think growing up that what I was taught to be interested in definitely revolved around Black culture. I think that was both from like my family and the upbringing that I had. We listened to Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey and R&B, and there were so many greats to look up to. But I think among my peers as well, they were very like, "Oh, you're Black," and they really put me in that box. And so there was this expectation for, "Oh, you must be into rap and hip hop and all of these things." And so and I still was at the same time as K-pop. I think there is a lot of through line, and many people know that now that is rap, and there's many influences from African American culture on K-pop. So yeah, I think those were what I was told, and honestly, I think in a way I still adhered to it, which is funny if I think about it. That I was listening to R&B. My preference among K-pop is R&B and hip hop, and almost every group in K-pop has a rapper in it. So, in a way, it was a battle to get people to understand that aspect of things.
I think in general, college in particular is such a sensitive time because you are trying to find your identity and to fit in. How did this play out in terms of your campus life?
I'll start actually from the beginning. So I went to the accepted students weekend at WashU. I had a fantastic time. And that was where I got introduced to the Korean culture community on campus. And that includes both the students who are from Korea and, who are Korean American, but also just the activities. So there was a Korean Students Association, there was a K-pop dance cover group, all these things. And I love that. That was really how I made my decision. We went during the weekend where they have a show called Spirit of Korea, and I saw it, and it really inspired me, and that changed my life. So in terms of campus life, very quickly, I knew I wanted to be in that show. I saw it. I was like, I'm going to be in that one day. So I joined Korean Students Association very early. They had a lot of great events that I went to, and I met some of the executive board members, and I was like, oh, I want to be part of this too, and the K-pop dance cover group. So that was a huge part of it. But one thing about WashU that I think that a lot of people would not expect is it is a somewhat segregated campus. A lot of the cultures hang out in different pods, and that isn't necessarily always along racial lines. It also, like, they were very close pods, and those pods didn't really branch that much except in class. And so choosing to be part of the Korean community, and specifically be part of the executive board for Korean Students Association, caused me to miss out on some other, cultural involvement. So I was not a big part of Black Students Association, not on purpose necessarily, but it was something that, because my time was committed in one place, then I wasn't able to build those connections as much in the Black Students Association until later in college. So that was one challenge about it, that, being part of that group, I did get looks on campus. I did get some, what are you doing? I had a Black roommate in freshman year, and she would, be like, why are you interested in this? I had posters on my room that she would be, looking at them and confused and wondering what that's all about, but then didn't really get into it herself. So, campus life did have some of those challenges in terms of trying to give attention to both parts of my identity in terms of my hobby and then also just myself as a Black student.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, before we actually double click on that, because I think as many people are probably picking up that there's probably many more layers underneath that particular experience. Just knowing how, again, like finding your tribe in college is so important. But maybe before we go there, we could play a little game.
Yeah.
So many people listening will be familiar with this. We do this every episode. It's Would You Rather? And this will continue us getting to know you. So we wanted to really understand how deep the K-pop fandom goes. All right. So, would you rather have the power to instantly learn any language fluently or have the power to teleport to any country and have free food and vibes?
I would choose to learn any language instantly, and then I can travel to where I want to go and get vibes from speaking the language. Yeah.
I
I think
love that. Wait, but why is that the one that you would lean toward? I mean, besides, I guess, the practicality, like, yes, you can hop a plane.
Well, I think being someone who majored in Korean, and actually a lot of people probably know this from videos on YouTube, like when you speak someone's language in their country, they often will give you the vibes. They get very excited. They feel a lot of appreciation for the effort. And so, I've had many of those encounters with people just because I spoke hello, honestly. Nothing fancy. And just saying hello was enough to be like, oh, here's some free stuff, here's some free food. Let me, do this for you or give you a drink or something. So that's why I would pick it. It always makes me smile when I get to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also, I mean, one, I feel like you actually are really good at picking up languages. I feel like you dabbled in a little Portuguese, now learning Haitian Creole. So,
Yep, yep.
actually, well, you said it could make someone smile when you're able to share their language. Are you able
Oh
to
goodness.
say something for us in Korean?
Oh goodness. It's been a while, so I will say that. But 안녕하세요. 제 이름은 케냐입니다. 워싱턴 대학교에서 한국 언어를 공부했는데 오랜만에 한국어 말하고 있어요. 네, 감사합니다. It's
I
been so
love it.
long.
We'll have to put subtitles on that because even I don't know what that was.
I
But
I did
it
my
sounded
classic
beautiful.
intro, my classic hello, I'm Kenya. I majored in Korean and language and culture at Washington University. And after a long time, I'm speaking Korean. So thank you.
Yeah. We know the passage of time is tough.
Yep.
So
Yep.
um Okay, we'll do one more. Would you rather? So, would you rather have free concert tickets to a K-pop show of your choice, best seats of your choice, or free signed books from your favorite author for a year?
Just one concert?
Maybe like concerts from your favorite like group or something.
Group. For my favorite group, then yes, yes. For then yeah, I would do the best seats I can get. K-pop, my favorite group. And honestly, it's very exciting because we got tickets to BTS and their tour this year. So exciting! I'm taking my sister, I'm taking my mom, taking my boyfriend. Everyone's got to experience this. It's going to be fantastic. So definitely, it's an experience that would be worthwhile for sure for free.
That's awesome. Yeah, family affair. Very
Yeah.
excited to experience my first BTS concert. We were supposed to actually go to one together in 2020, and unfortunately, that one got canceled. So it's a full circle moment.
Yeah.
We're very excited. I should also mention the reason why I, you know, picked the other option as being free signed books is Kenya also has a book Instagram because she's an avid reader. So at the end, we'll make sure to share that information with you guys as well. But let's dive back into kind of this major decision point. Clearly, your Korean bona fides are legit, and you learned a ton in college about Korean culture. But, you know, we were leaving off right at the point where you were discussing kind of the impact of choosing to become a part of the Korean Student Association. And that leadership position, number one, making you incredibly visible in the Korean community on campus, but then also coming at the maybe cost or trade off of your involvement in the Black community. What was kind of the biggest cost or you know challenge that you found of sitting in that very visible position in the Korean Student Association?
I think the biggest challenge for me was there was some, visibility on both sides, both from the Korean community and from the Black community. For myself, I had Black friends on campus, and so they were familiar with me, but they often they would ask me, why am I involved in this? Or I'd go periodically to BSA events. So there was criticism both of among the Korean community, should I, a foreigner, as in Korean language, they say "외국인," which is foreigner. So, like, as a foreigner, should I be president of Korean Students Association, which is where I rose up to. I was creative director and VP of finance as well. On the other hand, there was also this like, why is she dedicating again, like even more dedicating my time to this group and trying to be president of Korean Student Association instead of president of Black Student Association. Something that I think was my most misunderstood point. I think a lot of people did not understand why. And I, honestly, looking back on it, maybe I didn't explain it all the way to the extent because I think what most people knew about me was the fandom of K-pop. But of course, for me, it goes much deeper than that. I think my family knows some extent of that. I liked like older Korean music. I liked Korean shows and Korean movies and Korean dramas. I mean, there's a lot to go on, and so yeah, I think it is challenging to explain that too to someone who has no familiarity with that. I mean, how do you explain like, oh, I love a culture, and I want to be involved in it. I also want to bridge the gap between Black culture and Korean culture. Someone who's very aware of the issues of cultural appropriation, which many K-pop fans have been aware of and have talked about extensively, especially Black K-pop fans. We have been very vocal about cultural appropriation when it happened in K-pop music, especially when it was from our favorite groups, and there were moments of disappointment with those groups. So
Did any of those moments of disappointment make you kind of question the path that you were going down? Or were there any moments where you maybe considered other majors or other ways to spend your time?
yeah, I think there were a few inflection points. I think when my groups early on, there was I think a lot of K-pop fans we gave a little bit of lenience where we could. If it was something that was truly about ignorance and not malice. There were times where we'd be like, they need to educate themselves. And also, we share the responsibility among the groups and their management. And that's really important to do as well. I think, there were a few incidents that were just very unsavory of, stereotypes and things like that, or even a music video would come out and the cornrows would be out and the outfits. It was just too egregious to a certain point. And sometimes I'd be like, why? Why am I listening to this when this is such an obvious thing that I know that they know about, versus like a deep cut aspect of Black American culture. But there was also an incident on campus specifically back during those years. If people remember Yik Yak, when that whole thing happened, I think it was like 2014, 2015. But there was a student on our campus who made a post in a face mask, one of the charcoal masks, and said, "Oh, I'm in the Zulu tribe." And that was very challenging for me. And that was actually when I was president or like vice president. I was pretty high up at that point in the community. And, in response to that, my organization, Korean Students Association and Black Students Association, had a co-event where we educated. And I became emotional at that event. I remember that there were many times that I was very vulnerable in front of people. And it did hurt. And it did not feel good that there were people that I knew and that I was friends with, and even more so that during the time that I'm representing the Korean Students Association, that there would be something that would be so offensive, especially during, Jameelah, I don't know, we're actually about 8 years apart. So so she may not remember this, but during that time there were a lot of those incidents where there were students doing those kinds of offensive stunts. And so it got a lot of attention even beyond the school. Actually, it was a big deal when it happened. So
Wow.
yeah, definitely
When
a
you
challenging
mentioned Yik Yak,
situation.
I was like,
Yeah.
this is, I was like, this is one of those
A
moments where our age
throwback.
difference is coming through.
It survived for like 2 years. Like
Yeah, yeah. Wait, is this like a video platform or something?
No, so Yik Yak, it was kind of like, if you know Fishbowl, it was kind of like Fishbowl, but it was for college students, and people would write things you were anonymous. And so there was a lot of
Oh,
craziness happening there. People were all the audacity came out, okay, and were all sorts of
okay.
crazy things. So on several campuses, this was happening. So a lot of students were calling to Yik Yak, hey, y'all need to figure something out to moderate and keep these people from doing their racism. But on our campus, there were incidents, but specifically the photo, I believe, was posted on Facebook or something. But it was right around that exact same time with Yik Yak and all these rude, racist posts and fraternities getting canceled. It was a weird time, a lot of news and things happening during that 2013 to 2017, which is when I went to college.
Well, thanks for educating probably several of our listeners about what that was. And I'm sure some people are like, "What's fishbowl?" But
Yeah.
we're not going to get into it.
Yeah.
But it definitely sounds like a really tough moment both for you personally, but on campus, and ensuring that everyone was able to feel safe in their identities on campus as well. That it has been a lot of discourse about cultural appropriation and the K-pop phenomenon. About 8% of K-pop fans identify as Black, so it's not a small group. And again, the linkages of the musical tradition in the Black community in America to K-pop, that the lineage is clear. But yeah, how do you understand your role in Korean culture, and then also, how K-pop really relates to the Black community as a whole?
For me, it was always a challenge because I had to balance both. And I had to balance both the criticism of cultural appropriation with my love for Korean culture. I think I wanted to be a person who could bridge the gap and bring those cultures together because there was conflict. I mean, if we look back at the LA riots and that history, a lot of the pushback I got, especially in the beginning when I first became a fan, was why are you a fan of these people who are racist against us? There was this idea that Asian and Black people had conflict with each other. And so for me, I wanted to, you know, be some part in alleviating some of that tension because we have more in common than, difference. So I think on both sides, it was like, I wanted to educate my Black peers, my family. Hey, this culture is really interesting. Let's throw out all those stereotypes that people had. Even in college, someone was like, oh, why do you have all those Asian women on your wall? And they were very clearly men. It was Shiny and EXO, male groups. But there are these stereotypes that come from white supremacy. And so I wanted to help alleviate that, but also help my Asian friends and my Korean friends to understand more about Black culture and how Black culture influenced K-pop. So I felt like I was, somewhere in the middle, that I could be part of that movement to educate about both cultures in a way through one subgenre that I call K-pop, a subgenre of hip hop, and it has mixed, influences of EDM, Korean traditional music. It really is, I consider, a separate genre, although it is heavily, heavily influenced by Black culture.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure trying to see where you could bring the two communities together was so important for you, ultimately feeling belonging for yourself. How did the kind of identities that you carry influence what you felt was risky or what you felt was allowed for yourself at this point? Um, one, you're making a choice about where to hang out, but you're also making a choice potentially that would impact your career.
I will say one that I haven't talked about much is being plus size, actually. So being plus size and trying to dance K-pop, as many folks will know, K-pop idols are very thin. More thin than even thin in America is. So there are many times where I felt, oh, can I do these dances? Can I do the dress up? And as a K-pop cover group, we had costumes and we did covers as much as similar as possible to the original. And so I felt like, oh, am I standing out like a sore thumb in some ways? There were a lot of, Korean Americans, Chinese Americans, just, even white Americans who were all together dancing in this cover group. And I think, there were 1 to 5 Black people in the whole cover group. So I did feel like I stood out in addition, both my race and my size. So, I think that was challenging for me to understand where I fit in there. Of course, there was also the aspect of just like my hair and things like that in terms of my appearance and how did that fit in. Career wise, I'd say, coming from an immigrant parent, of course, as people say, the engineering, lawyer, doctor, those three are the prestige. The prestige is there. And of course, I had an older sister who to look up to, nudge, nudge, to my sister is
Who are
very
you talking
impressive,
about?
very impressive. I have big shoes to fill, after my sister. So there was this thing of like, oh, my sister went to amazing schools, studied, very successful. And then I come home, I'm like, I want to major in Korean. So, that thankfully, it didn't go as poorly as I probably would have expected. I would have thought that would have been pretty rough because our mom is an educator, and so she's very committed to education. So I was worried about it, of course, but it went better than it could have gone. I think with her, but yeah, I think definitely my immigrant parent identity was, is a unique part of this versus like being a Black American solely. And me and my sister Jameelah, of course, Jameelah talk about this a lot, of the difference of Black American culture, which our dad is Black American, versus being Haitian American with my mom.
Yeah, I mean, again, like so many of the choices that we make really are not in a vacuum. It is really in the context of who we are ourselves and also the family system and values that we grow up with. Well, it sounds like you did have that moment of feeling really visible on stage. Are there any particular memories that come to mind for you that felt especially painful or memorable that just made really clear just how visible you were?
There were a couple, I think specifically even like I was just talking about, size. When it comes to uniforms, there was one incident. So I was part of a K-pop cover group, but I also joined another show called Lunar New Year Festival, and that festival is for Lunar New Year. So that's a Pan Asian holiday. And so one year I choreographed Korean Fan, which is a traditional dance with fans. They were pink and they had like feathers on them. You should look it up for sure. It's a really beautiful dance. But I choreographed that one year, and just about the uniforms, they are handbook, so they bought one set because they're very elaborate. So the school had one set that was kept in storage, and so when I choreographed it, it actually turned out I did not fit one of the uniforms that was set. So I had to buy actually two new uniforms from another company. They shipped over from Asia. And so that definitely became it became apparent. I was like, okay, I'm a bit different than the usual clientele uh, for these uniforms. And then even with the K-pop cover dance group, there was another dance where all the girls bought the same pair of pants, I think from Zara or somewhere. And unfortunately, they did not have a plus size for it. So I actually ended up buying different pants from all the other girls. So that became very obvious. And, even with my hair, that was something trying to style it or do the hairography, which is very common in K pop, trying to flip my hair. There are many times where it was a little bit more challenging for me to adhere to the choreography as it was, performed. Even there's one dance where I straightened my hair, but it was extremely windy that day. My hair was in my face the entire time. It was not moving the way that I hoped it would. So there was always something that I had to kind of overcome and advocate for myself to make sure that I felt some amount of belonging and try to overcome those challenges myself.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm struck as well. You touched on the classroom also, like you were actually studying Korean, and you mentioned your teachers being wonderful, which is great to hear. But was there anything that you experienced in terms of the classroom that also impacted your perspective and experience of this?
Yeah, I think in Korean 1 and 2, so tons of, non-Korean people were in that class, Korean Americans who maybe did not know Korean as well as they hoped through childhood. So I felt okay in those. I felt, like I was among peers and, I didn't stand out. But as I got into Korean 3 and 4, it started the, population of foreign students definitely went down. And the reason for that, of course, is that by Korean 2, we are actually pretty conversational. And so that was a great benefit. We had fantastic teachers, of course. So that's a testament to them that were able to speak, get ourselves out of trouble. I feel like we could do. But at 3 and 4, we started to go backwards, talk about history and idioms in Korean. And so, I believe in Korean 4, I was the only non-Korean student. And actually, many of the students were from South Korea. So actually, there were many students who were fluent in Korean 4 because, like I mentioned, it went beyond learning the language. It went to learning history and all these things that maybe they had not learned. So it was challenging in some ways in that year where, there were whole conversations happening that I was not receiving. So I actually ended up having individual sessions with my teacher after class to help me catch up with the, Korean students who were able to, speak fluently together in those classes.
Wow. I mean, again, it just strikes me just how much you kind of had to stand in your own self knowledge because in all of these situations, like you were just very visible. You were kind of singled out, not on purpose or intentionally, but just by the virtue of who you are. So it's incredible that you kind of stood through all of that. Yeah, just kind of pushing forward and thinking about the kind of next journey, coming out of this experience, what was maybe lonely about this whole journey? And, as you thought about post college, how did you think about being able to carry this identity and this interest forward?
I think, of course, even talking about the classroom, that was definitely a lonely aspect. Just really going back over everything we talked about. There were many times that I felt lonely, even before college. There just weren't that many people who were interested in it. So I used to even watch, I used to love to watch reaction videos. So on YouTube, there are a lot of videos just of like, oh, someone reacts to K pop for the first time. And I used to love to watch that because, you know, it was like seeing someone discover something that you love for the first time. And I needed that a bit, because among my community, even some of my friends were resistant. And I'd be like, can I show you this music video? They'd say, no, I don't want to see it at all. And, so getting some of that connection was from YouTube videos in a way. And that might seem ridiculous, but yeah, that's what I needed to feel some connection, or, even just like going to concerts. I was alone. I've gone to concerts alone before, actually. I went to a Teen Top concert, I think in Dallas. I flew by myself in college and I stayed in an Airbnb and I went by myself, which was a little bit intimidating, but I made it happen. I really wanted to see Teen Top. So there were many of those, uh, situations.
Wow, concerts, on your own. I love the fact that you have such resilience and confidence to go into these moments and spaces where you were lonely. What do you credit for giving you that resilience, that confidence, or maybe the stubbornness just to keep going despite these kind of moments of disconnection?
I'm glad you mentioned stubbornness because I do feel like there was a stubbornness in this versus confidence. And I think there
Maybe
was,
that's
yeah,
because I know you that I was
right,
like,
right, right. She clocked it. I'm like, the stubbornness I inherited from my wonderful mother, definitely kept me going. But also the just my passion was really what kept me going, even if I didn't feel confident. I felt very nervous at that T Top concert. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm here alone. But in addition to that, I think the people I met and the connection you forge when you like something unique with other people, when you find your tribe, it is such a wonderful experience in the wild. I got there was an older gentleman there by himself. Sometimes it's a mom who's there with her kids. And so I realized there are a lot of people who go to these concerts alone. And so I felt a lot less, uncomfortable at that point once I saw that this is a very diverse fandom who was there. And, I just knew I wasn't alone and I could always find people who love the same thing and bond with them over that. So I think that got me through it, but there were surely times that I was feeling, oh gosh, what am I doing, with going to these concerts or spending money on it, versus spending money on something else. But to me, I always found it very worthwhile and I always had a great time.
yeah, I love that. And again, I think everyone should try to go to a concert by themselves at least once. Like it's really a special experience, and you feel the community with the fact that you all share that common love of the artist who's performing. Um, well, of course, part of this is really thinking about how this ultimately changed the way that you see yourself going forward, or how you understood your own identities, after having gone through this experience and gone through college. Is there something new about how you see yourself now that you're on the other side of this college experience?
I think college. So although I had a wonderful time the first 3 years. In my senior year, might have been early senior year, there was a challenging incident that kind of broke off, caused a bit of a rift in my love of K-pop. And so since then, I've definitely sat more into my identity as a Black woman versus, as a Black woman, of course, first, which I always was, but I think I've definitely sat with that and been more critical and more, kind of, um, yeah, I've thought more critically about what I am dedicating my time to and who I choose to be a fan of. In senior year of college, when I was president of the Korean Students Association, I applied for another position, which is called head choreographer of Spirit of Korea. I've been a part of Spirit of Korea for 3 years before. Every year I did it. Every year I did the K-pop cover group. And the head choreographer, that was the first role that I wanted to do. I did not expect to be president at all. I did not expect to win that election. So that was a surprise. But my main goal was the choreography because I love to dance. And I loved to do K-pop covers. So I found a running partner. It's always two. Found a wonderful running partner. She was a grad student. Also had been heavily involved in Spirit of Korea. And we came up with a great application. I feel like we worked together and made a great rapport. But there was another pair who applied, um, and we were not selected. And part of the decision making. So usually the president of Korean Student Association is part of that decision. In this case, I recused myself, of course, as I should. But one of my friends was in it because I believe she was one of the top three positions, and the decision was taking longer than I thought. So I just asked. I was like, "Is there something? Is there a stalemate of sorts? Is there something that is happening that's causing my candidacy not to go forward because, I think, most of us thought I was a shoo-in. And she admitted, yeah, there was someone who was against me getting it. And so, yeah, I did not get it. It was heartbreaking and it was very challenging for me, especially to hear that there was an issue with myself as a person. My running partner was Korean actually. So, um, we thought we had a really fantastic candidacy. And so I was told to shorten my tenure as president. I was supposed to be president of Korean Student Association for a bit longer, but I was told to quietly leave that position. And that was very, very challenging for me. And that reminded me once again that I am not fully welcome in that community in the way that I thought I was. And the funny thing is, there were, in previous years when I was a first year, there was another student. She was also Black, and she was very heavily involved in the Korean community. And she warned me back then, way back then, in first year. She was like, "Hey, by the way, don't try to get too high up in the Korean Students Association. You will not make it there." I did, and that was my stubbornness. I wanted to make it there, just to prove people wrong. But in the end, yeah, I look back on that and I appreciate her for doing that for me, and saying that to me. But yeah, that's how it ended. And so for me, it was a very, very challenging time for me, and I became a little bit more resistant to, I had to take a break. It was a bit of a traumatic situation for me, and so I had to take a bit of a break. Now it's more so because I just don't have the time I used to. I like my sleep. I can't be, waking up at 6 a.m. to watch the Mnet Asian Music Awards anymore. But definitely right after college, I had to step back for some time because of that, how things ended at that time.
That is such a intense and painful experience, especially with how much love and care you gave to this organization and to this interest and passion that you had. Was there any part of yourself or others that you had to forgive coming out of that to be able to move forward and move on?
For myself, the main thing that I had to forgive was just like, although I had gotten the, warning of sorts from that peer of mine, I followed my heart and I felt like that was fair for me to do. I felt like authentic to myself, and there are many parts that I did enjoy. And I think, remembering that the ending doesn't, contradict all the amazing experiences I got to have. So that was one part. I think with the other folks, I think, I think I'm still working through that one. To be honest, I think right afterward there was a lot of, just like talking about it and trying to move forward. But there are still parts that I think hurt, and I think I still have some, sometimes when I'm like listening to K-pop and stuff, I think about that time. At the end of the day, I don't harbor any like ill will towards anyone for like what happened. I think it was just a circumstance, and in a way, looking back, it did make sense. I was too close to that conflict, and so continuing in my role probably wouldn't have made as much sense, even for myself and protecting my spirit. So in a way, I'm thankful for that, honestly, because I struggled with that decision quite a bit. But yeah, in the end, I don't regret the way that things went. There were plenty of positives to kind of counterbalance, but I am more honest with myself, I guess, in the aftermath of that, and I try to reflect a bit more and not lead with enjoyment to motivate my decision making as much anymore.
Wow, that's incredibly brave and mature. Uh, Truly incredible that you've been able to kind of make meaning of that experience and still move ahead. And I guess, is there any part of you that can kind of understand a little bit of where maybe this particular person who was resistant, but maybe more generally where some of their resistance might have come from?
Absolutely, I do. And I do in some ways. I definitely have empathy for the idea of like, for me, I was very cognizant of the fact that me as a Black woman being president of the Korean Students Association was already a step, a big step, and a very unique step. Um, but on the other hand, even you touched on it, I dedicated a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of, my attention and my advocacy to this culture. And I felt like I'd been very, committed to it, respectful to it. And I really wanted to advocate to help in some ways, also to alleviate, like I mentioned, the racism that was that faces the Asian community. And so that was something where I was like, I wanted that to be reciprocal. And this was also, like I said, I was president at the time of that incident with the Zulu tribe thing as well. So my presidency was very tumultuous in that way at the time. And of course, also, Mike Brown and everything happening in Ferguson was around the same time as well. So it was a very things were tense on campus at that time. There was a lot of talk about racial justice and racial injustice. And so, I see both sides, but definitely it didn't feel good in my heart for sure. And I think my friends, understood that aspect too, even if, logically, I could see both sides of everything that was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to, of course, take care of your heart. I guess, was there any particular parts of yourself that you had to grieve coming out of that particular kind of ending of your senior year and that experience, or was that something much harder than you expected?
I think it was there were some parts that were easier in part because, this is something that a lot of K-pop fans can relate to is that as the groups get younger, you start to get like, oh, I can't relate to these children as much anymore. So being 22 coming out of college, that part was easy. The tough part, of course, that I still mourn this for sure, that I am not as aware of K-pop anymore, which I find sad because I would love to be more up to date with it in the way that I used to be. However, K-pop has changed a lot, and so what was popular back then, which is like I was a big fan of SM Entertainment, which is one of the companies. They had a lot of voices that resembled R&B. So I love their music so much. But right now, Afrobeats is very popular K-pop right now, which I love Afrobeats. So I still love it, but it is different for sure. The genre has moved with the zeitgeist of the world, and so Afrobeats is popular. There were some more EDM influences. So things just changed, and so it just got harder to keep up with, especially joining the workforce. So I do still wish that I could get back into K-pop, and not to the full extent, of course. I don't think I could do that again. But I do want to keep up with the culture, and thankfully, though, of course, I read now, and I love Korean literature. So that's one way that I'm keeping up with the culture.
I love it. Well, you touched on your career now. So it sounds like, and of course, your family's very proud of you. So it sounds like majoring in Korean really shaped the career that you built ultimately. Can you talk about the ways that that experience and your major shows up in the work that you do today?
Sure. It's I've had a few opportunities. So of course, Jameelah mentioned earlier, I'm a social media manager. I've worked at a few different places doing social media, and so K-pop is very a huge part of the social media conversation. So that has been very helpful in terms of real time marketing. Actually, a few jobs ago, there was one time where I made a post about BTS, and this was right at the height of when they were breaking into the Western market. They got their first nomination at the Billboard Music Awards, and I made a post that just said like, "Oh, when I'm trying to find work-related things to post about, but all the trending topics are about how BTS paved the way," and it went viral. And it was it. I mean, it was a great success. My managers and everyone on the team is very curious of like, what is this BTS and K-pop, and how did this idea come about to have this tweet? Which, like I mentioned, I mean, the idea of it was literally what I wrote. Um, but that's been very helpful. There have been a few times I need to translate certain tweets pretty quickly, or fix a translation. So that's been helpful in being able to read Korean and then look at the sentence structure and understand what's going on. So I think those two aspects, especially being on social, it's been very helpful. And then even now having my own personal account, which isn't a job yet, but definitely a big commitment of my time. It's been helpful to know about, K-pop and what people are talking about, which is definitely on the top of a lot of people's minds right now with K-pop Demon Hunters and of course BTS's tour.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad everything seemed to have actually worked out, unlike our immigrant mother's fears. Um, but when you're thinking about people listening, what's maybe one thing you would want to say to someone who has a passion or interest that other people kind of don't accept or understand?
I would say give yourself grace, number one, for the times that you feel maybe nervous or insecure. Give yourself that space to feel that because it is normal. But I will also say give other people grace, because if it is truly something unpopular like what I did, there are reasons for it, for people to have that hesitance. And so, give them that space and be patient, and it can really pay off. I know my two sisters both ended up liking some K-pop that I slipped into some playlist. That's my favorite way to introduce people to K-pop. You just put one little song next to another similar American song. People are like, oh, they're dancing. They're like, what's this? And I'm like, well, let me tell you about something. So it definitely is rewarding if you give that time and help the people you love understand what you love.
I love it. I literally had a song playing right before this. So yeah, it worked. It worked. And because this show is all about building courage to live your truth, what would you like to say to the haters? The people who maybe judged your interests and passions without understanding the reality behind it.
Well, to the haters, I'd say, look who's listening to K-pop now. Everyone has been singing Soda Pop. Okay, everyone's been singing Golden from K-pop Demon Hunters. I'm like, look at everyone who's listening to it now, and y'all know who are Asian women and who are Asian men now. So I, I hope that
Right.
people remember that I was there first. No, I'm just kidding.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Kenya, for being on Unpopular Decisions. Your story is so inspirational about just truly following your heart and the incredible resilience it means to still live in your truth. So thank you so much.
Of course, it was great to talk about it and have the conversation with my sister.
I love it. I love it. And of course, is there anything that you want to share with our listeners? Anything that you want to plug?
Yeah, well, I have a bookstagram called The Kindly Reader, not Kindle, Kindly, The Kindly Reader. So follow me if you're interested in learning about my book recs. I read all genres and I love to promote diverse literature. But I also want to give a quick shout out to, of course, my teachers, Dr. Ko, Dr. Kip, and Professor Lee. They were such wonderful helps to me in my college career, and I still think about them all the time. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Shout out to teachers and educators everywhere. So thank you again for being on. If today's conversation sparks something for you, don't ignore it. You're not doing life wrong, you're doing life courageously. Be sure to subscribe to Unpopular Decisions wherever you listen to your podcasts for more honest conversations about living your truth. And if this episode resonated, please share it with someone who might get something from it. Because when one person chooses boldly, it opens the door to a million more brave choices. Thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here.